Welcome to the Producer's Journal podcast. How are you doing today? My name is Derek, and I am your host, and I'm here to discuss my experiences as a podcast producer and agency owner. Follow me on Facebook at SRP Studios and on Instagram at SRP Studios LLC. This show is recorded at SRP Studios in Hernando, Mississippi, and produced by Shelby Row Productions, a digital content production agency. Do you want to start a podcast? Go to ShelbyRowProductions.com and schedule that free consultation. And go to that description and click that Patreon link. Help the cause. Join the tip jar. $1 a month would go a long way. Thank you so much. Well then, for anyone that has been following this podcast, you understand now that this is the first episode in a very long time. And I do apologize for that. And on a whim, I decided to crank everything up just because I wanted to have fun. I enjoy playing that music and reading that script as my intro. All the podcasts that I produce for myself, so this one, The Producer's Journal, The Real Hernando, and The Rhythm Section podcast, none of them have pre-produced intros or outros. And it's just music, and my intro is unique with each episode because I'm pulling from a bullet point or a script. You know, I know what I'm going to say going into it. It's organized, but it's organic with each episode. The Real Hernando, I add the music in post. I don't. My amazing editor, Sebastian Fredette, does. But with the rhythm section and this podcast, I treat it like radio. And I play everything in real time. The rhythm section podcast is so much fun. I finally kind of get to experience what it's like to host a radio show. And many episodes ago, I talked about my time in radio. I worked in radio from 1995 through 2005, solid 10 years, and it was all editing, producing, managing. None of it was on air, but I was surrounded by it. So I have a strong relationship with radio from that experience. And honestly, the radio experience helped me with podcasting because I already had a frame of mind on how it all works. But all these years later, I have the Rhythm Section podcast where I'm playing music, but I'm also playing sound effects and releasing people's music. It's really wild. And it's been a good time. And gosh, I should have looked at the last time I threw an episode in here, but so much has changed. 2023 has been such a different year. The chapter has definitely changed. It's a new chapter, 2023, on not only a business level, a podcast producer level, and a personal level. And a lot of it has to do with the Rhythm Section podcast. That has really changed my life in so many ways. It's become popular and has gained a real reach in a very rich community. That community is the Memphis music community. And when I had the idea to start the Rhythm Section podcast, it was just an idea because it made sense. I have friends in music. I've been a musician forever. And start a podcast where you're talking with your music friends. But then when I got the studio, I knew that the possibility was there. You know, I had no excuse at that point. Because before, when I was just working out of my apartment, you're limited. But once I had the studio, I knew that was going to happen. And then it wasn't until me and my buddy Jeff Ward recorded some content in my studio back in November of 2022. I was testing out my studio. The very table that I record the rhythm section on needed to be tested. You know, I'd been building the studio for a handful of months, and then at some point you have to start playing with your toys so you can test it and work through the bugs and just continue to upgrade, update. So I invited Jeff into the studio, and he was the first person that I recorded content with on that table. I had a completely different camera setup, but from word go, I set up 3 cameras. I knew that that spot was going to be a multi-camera spot. I wanted to have that Joe Rogan look. But the cameras were crappy, and I didn't have them in a good spot. You know, I had to do that recording to then learn what I need to do next, because I was like, I tried X and there was all these issues that I didn't like. So let's move on to Y with these corrections. And then slowly I built the studio that, you know, is what it is now. When you watch the Rhythm Section podcast, you know, it's been pretty consistent to that. Multi-camera, black backdrops, backlighting, good sound. So anyways, going back to the story. So I tell Jeff the idea, and he loves it, of course. And I tell him, man, you know, obviously you're going to be a guest on this, you know, multiple times. And he loved the idea, and that was it. Well, then later that day, I was really just pondering and was thinking about the podcast in a different way now. Like, it clicked, and it became, you know, it clicked in my head where I knew that that was going to be my next thing. Like, I was going to move forward with it and actually put it into action, because I really enjoyed talking with Jeff. He and I have been buddies for several years now, and he's a drummer. I'm a bass player, hence the Rhythm Section. Jeff and I have played in several bands together over several years, dozens and dozens of gigs together. So he and I know how to chill, and we are close friends, and it felt effortless. And Jeff was excellent on the microphone. It just worked. So I decided, man, I'm going to pitch to Jeff that I want to do this music podcast with him as a co-host. Obviously, he jumped all over that and off and running. And I did something that I don't like to do. I started things before everything was ready. I do like rolling things out prepared, so it's set in place and the branding is there and the templates are there and the system on how to promote a podcast is there, much like the Real Hernando. That was very planned. That didn't launch until everything was ready. At least everything that was in my brain was ready. I needed to paint the vision to completion before launching that. Well, I wanted to get moving on the Rhythm Section podcast, so we came up with a name, and it only lived on my YouTube channel for a minute. We had a name. We were still working on the art. We literally just decided we're a podcast. We're called the Rhythm Section Podcast, and we're going to do another video and throw it on my YouTube channel stating that, without branding, without, you know, a Facebook page for it, nothing. It was just a video on my channel. And I even talk about it in that first episode. I just wanted to move on it and just work out the bugs and just tackle it. And sure enough, through that experience, I immediately knew I didn't like my microphone boom arms. They were in the camera shot. Once I figured out the best camera angles I could get and the best backdropping and backlighting I could get, I knew that was going to be in place. Well, then when watching it, I could tell the boom arms were a nuisance. Didn't look good. So I bought new mic stands that were tabletop mic stands. And those are the little things that you work out over time. And I knew that if I never started that podcast or started using the studio in general, it wouldn't grow. So it all worked out where then me and Jeff ended up creating something very special. And I say that because it's special to us and how it's been for us and what it's done for us as people and as musicians, and building our confidence, because we legitimately built an audience. The Memphis music community jumped all over it, and this thing has grown pretty quickly. The overall reach for the lifetime of it, going back to November of last year, total reach, user impact as it's called, over 250,000. Now, let me explain what that means. That is not 250,000 views or downloads. It's overall reach. And that, if we're going to break into a lesson right now, that's the key stat. That's the key analytic that you want when you want to monetize content. Because it's not all about who listens to a full episode. It's also about who sees you on social media. Who's seeing those clips. Hopefully you're doing video-based and you're publishing clips on Facebook and Instagram. So those are more eyeballs. Then you start getting engagements, which then pushes your post further out, and it just keeps creating what's called impressions. Anytime a post flies through your screen of your phone, it created an impression. It cataloged, sort of like driving by a billboard. So you put all those things in one big pot, and the stew that comes out of it is called total user impact. So the real Hernando Q1 of 2023 is over 130,000, but now the rhythm section's almost doubled it, and in a different way. The Hernando audience is more chill, because Hernando is more chill, and the social media does pretty good. We put out a lot of content. But then now the other audience, the Memphis music community, we're all musicians. So not only are we all kind of odd and, aggressive at life and just kind of out there and hustling, but the Memphis community, as I've learned, which is what makes this so special, is so close. The community is tight, and it's perfect size. And they have really started engaging with us, especially when we started interviewing. First interview we did was Tim Dill's lead singer of Fever Tree. And it was the 4th episode. Me and Jeff did a few episodes going back to Starting Before You're Ready. Like, the first 3 episodes of that podcast are just co-hosts because we hadn't booked an interview yet. It took us a couple weeks to get one recorded, and then, okay, now how are we going to edit a podcast with a third participant and let the learning begin there? But we finally made it. Tim Dill's episode 1. So we start rolling out all these amazing interviews of all these amazing people in Memphis and putting out tons of clips. We set up a podcast page called the Rhythm Section Pod, our Facebook page, a link tree. So now when you go to the description, you click that link tree and it will take you to all of our platforms that podcast is on. It's still limited. Again, it's YouTube, Facebook. It has its own audio channel where the audio feed goes to Spotify and Apple. And that's it for right now. And it's a tight budget, so I don't have a social media manager on it like I do the Real Hernando. So that leaves it up to me, which sucks. But I have my editor doing the writing for me, and then I do all the uploading and management of all the clips. But it's cool. We put out a good amount. Because it just lives on Facebook, the clips are in wide format, and I don't care about time. They don't have to fall within a certain time parameter, like Reels and TikToks. That stuff's all limited, shorts, 60 seconds. But if you just do a regular widescreen video for Facebook, it can be it doesn't matter, to the point where I actually publish the full episodes now on Facebook. Monday, 6 p.m. Central, the video goes out on YouTube and Facebook, and I upload a 50, sometimes 60, maybe in 70-minute video file on Facebook and publish it, and it actually gets traction. It's interesting. I have a lot of fun with that. But over time now, not only have, this is what the cool part is too, and I learned a lot here, is the audience engaged with us. They slowly started getting it, and we started building a little audience. And, with each guest that comes in, they share, so we get some more followers, and, it starts moving that way. So they start heading towards us, right? But then early on, me and Jeff, made a proclamation that we were going to go out and for real start looking and checking out bands, coming out to support, and network. And that's really what made everything pop. And that's where it gets special. And that's where I'm starting to, learn what all of these awesome players are like, both on stage and off. You start shaking hands and networking, and you become first name friends with all the right players. And the respect in each direction increases. I have so much more respect for our local musicians, and they go out of their way to make it very clear to me and Jeff that they respect us as what we do, and respect what it is and what it's doing. And it's just created this machine where I go out almost every weekend now, and I'm enjoying myself. So then that's personal now. I'm being more social, which has been a very big issue of mine. Just go check out all my mental health videos on my channel, and you'll understand why. But it really has catapulted me and Jeff as people, as a team, as musicians, and then me individually and him individually. Cool. Too, it's affecting him differently than it is me. That's his space. So on a personal level, no, let me take that back. Yes, on a personal, it helps with my confidence, because I've now created a second entity that engages and connects with people. So that makes me feel good as a person. It's more confidence. But also as a producer, and how to lay out and produce a podcast like this, and how you format and run my team for it. And it just made me even realize more that I feel like my calling. And that's why I am working my tail off to monetize these entities through sponsorship and ad revenue. So with that, let me shift over to the Real Hernando, because the Real Hernando is well on its way in the sponsorship world. Currently, It has 4. And that adds to this year. That adds to the specialness. I knew that the Real Hernando had its title sponsor last year. I think maybe late November they confirmed. So that was so great that I knew I was rolling into 2023 having completed one of my goals for that year, and that was to get it sponsored. My other goals was to get a local client and build a studio, and those came true as well. So that made 2022 an amazing year in hindsight. It didn't feel like it then, that's for sure, but definitely got some stuff accomplished. So shortly after getting the title and rolling into the new year, I didn't even look for another sponsor through January. I put it all to pause because January was a critical month because we were ramping season number 2 back up for the Real Hernando. Now, I wanted to kind of change the look, so I just stirred up my team and we tweaked some of the branding, kept the colors and everything, but just tweaked the look of the thumbnails. Now we're incorporating a sponsor that we produced a commercial for, so now we got to make that commercial. We got to put their logo in every place we can find. I mean, then start recording new content, and then this season 2 for the Real Hernando was now in studio. That was a big shift. Season 1 was all on location, and I kept it very simple, and I just rolled up with one camera, some wireless mics, and that was it. No lighting, nothing. Now I have a studio. I took a space in my second room and made it basically the Real Hernando space with a different look than the Rhythm Section podcast. And then now that's a multi-camera podcast. So now we got to figure out all the editing on that and a lot of work to ramp up a new season with so many changes. We had so many changes, but we got through it. We launched back up in February of this month. I think starting around mid-February is when I started talking and trying to find other sponsors. Sponsor number 2 is Gustafson Properties. Easy for me to say. They're a custom home building company here, and I befriended the owner. His name is Brandon Gustafson because he was on the Real Hernando podcast in 2022, and it was one of those deals where we kind of built a relationship because of that, to the point where, he came to my ribbon cutting, so that was cool. And then when he was on the podcast, I had a questionnaire that I sent him to get a testimonial for his experience. And the last question was, would you be interested in sponsoring the Real Hernando? And I did that with several guests. I got 4 yeses, and Brandon was the one that worked out. He said yes, and of the 4, that's the one that happened. The other ones were pitched, but they didn't go anywhere. But that's sales. So Brandon Gustafson stepped up. We talked about it for a few weeks, and then he decided that not only is there value in the reach he's going to get, but he likes what this podcast supports, or the Real Hernando supports. So he bought a mid-level, which means he has a commercial in the middle of the interview and mentions on socials, and I'm not going to bury everybody with the tiers and the packages, but he's at a mid-level, which the mid-level only allows 3 sponsors because I can't have a 10-minute commercial in the middle. So 3 sponsors that each get about 15 seconds. That's the mid-level. And then the low level is where the Art Council comes in. The Art Council, the DeSoto Art Council, a nonprofit, gets it and is buying in on the low level, which is, basic, but it's way less expensive, and I designed it so the small guys can participate. it's $1,000 for a whole year. You get your logo on a website and you get a monthly shout out on socials. And pretty simple. And so the Art Council bought into that. And then I'm working on a second mid-level with another company, but that is not as official. So it's like 3.5. But the reason why I run through all of that is everything that happens to the Real Hernando is then going to be implemented on the Rhythm Section podcast. The Real Hernando is what taught me everything. And it was definitely why the Rhythm Section podcast came together the way it did, because I did it differently. I just took a different approach, but everything I learned from the Real Hernando set me up. And so I'm continuing to grow the Real Hernando now. It's all about sponsors. That's the level it's at now. And there's sort of an end game. Only one title, only 3 mid-level. The low level can be unlimited, but we're aiming for 20. So there is a goal set, and then at some point we can continue to sell for the Real Hernando, but we can now try to monetize other entities. The Rhythm Section podcast. So that's coming around as well. And the pitch is being made. The PDF presentations being built. We've got our analytics. So it's in time. It's just in pace. Because the Real Hernando is ahead of it. And that's the dream. To be that kind of producer, an executive producer, where I create entities that I own and somehow build audience and then monetize it. Because I'm definitely learning that if you have an audience, you have value. It's as simple as that. And it would be amazing if I could just have a career where I'm creating networks, podcasts, but networks, and everything that I do for, build something for another community or build something for a nonprofit and build an audience. And then it gets sponsored and monetized because it has reach and it's because of its purpose, and just continue to grow that way and just create a portfolio of, I guess my best version of my art and make a good living doing it that way, then dream come true. But I also know that that's a long game. That's a much slower growth, which I'm down with. But in order to balance that out, I need to have an aggressive side, and that's, of course, where the business side comes in and trying to get clients. So I have to balance both. It's just my reality for now. But these two podcasts, Hernando and Rhythm Section, they're gonna set the tone for sure, and we're gonna get those monetized, and then we can really start growing them. So, look, when I started this podcast today, I literally didn't know what the hell I was going to say. I prepared nothing. I broke out the script and played the music, rolled in like I did, and just started flapping my gums. And it's cool that it landed where it did, because it's important that I kind of reflect on the positive right now, because there's plenty of negative when you're a small business owner. And am I right, Ryan Duran from Boba Cream? I know you're listening. I know you can hear me. Pretty tough, isn't it? But man, wouldn't trade it in for anything. That's it, y'all. I appreciate y'all hanging out, as always. Let me go find my old outro script. Let's see what it says. Holy shit, there's a lot. I know better. I'm going to have to edit this down. Make sure to follow me on Facebook. There you go. Is that good enough? At SRP Studios. I'll give you that much. Go to Facebook, SRP Studios. Take care, guys. Thank you.